Yeah, so here we go, and oh,
yeah, there's a notification.
yeah, I think I made a mistake in fight part here. So yeah. Okay, right now it's receiving your content. Your audience will be a moment. Get ready.
I'm itching.
Yeah, so here we go. And are we live or I feel like...
Yep, we're live.
I think I made a mistake in the description, but I'll fix that really quick. Oh, we got one viewer watching right now.
That would be me.
Alright, alright. I want to fix the description if I have to. Oh. Yeah. Okay, the live stream is continuing, and then I'll just have to fix these horrible mistake I made right here. Store. Yeah, I think this is not good. We're off to a rough start right now.
Yeah, very rough.
Okay, right now it's received audience will be a moment. Get ready. Okay. Yeah, it's a bit okay. So I'll just make adjustments as we go right here, and then the live stream will keep going. I think I made a mistake in the description. I'll fix everything.
Let's see. If I can find some error.
I want to fix the description if I have to.
Right.
Okay, so fix the title at the very least, and everything should be going. So
Awesome.
okay, so right, okay. So I guess we should just start going, and I'll just make a few adjustments here and there and everything else. So
yeah.
Okay, so hello everyone who's currently watching. My name is Jorge from TheTimeWhen. I basically create videos, and I'm joined here by my co-host, Ancient History Guy.
Hello. Nice to be on it.
Yeah, so as you can probably see, we're in a rough start right now. Right now changing everything as we go along. We planned this out for a week, and as expected of me, everything's going wrong. So yeah, we'll make do.
Yeah.
So Ancient History Guys, so what are we going to talk about today?
We are going to talk about, to the best of my knowledge, the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Ancient propaganda. And British Imperialism.
Nice.
So
let's
this
get.
is gonna be fun.
Yeah. So. yeah. Let's see. Let's talk about the HRE, or Holy Roman Empire, which I think that French philosopher Voltaire put it right, is that it's neither holy, no Roman, or even an empire for that matter. And
no, really wasn't. Well, it was occasionally all three, and then occasionally not all three, and then sometimes it was nowhere near holy.
Yeah, and then the Habsburg came along, and then they came in, just take over not only Germany, and then the rest of Europe. And so, yeah, like, what would you best describe the Holy Roman Empire as? Like, what type of form of government would you say they have? Because I know they have, like, an electorate system where they elect a king until upon their death, but is it really a democracy, or is it something, like, how would we best describe this? Like, how would you best describe it as this form of government?
I would describe it as an utter mess, to be honest, because it's essentially a collection of independent states all voting for a head of state that has hardly any power whatsoever, and it's just a mess. And to be honest, when Napoleon invaded and dissolved it, I think he just saw it as a mess and just decided to essentially try and fix it all.
Yeah,
But after you.
Oh, thank you. When I think that, like, Napoleon, like, this is one of the good things I say Napoleon has done that he contributed to, besides spreading the revolution and the rise of liberalism and all that. I think that when he saw everything, like, he saw duchies and kingdoms and just like pretty much a mess. I think he did pretty good when it comes to simplifying just everything, which is for the best, really, because if you think about it, after Napoleon simplified the borders in Central Europe, he essentially indirectly just led for German reunification after the Treaty of Versailles in the late 1800s, I believe. So in a way, Napoleon created Germany, modern day Germany, in a way.
Definitely.
Okay.
Oh, stream offline.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should have just done a practice run, to be quite honest, to see how this.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we'll try to do this when we try to do it in your channel, if we ever if this goes well. Okay, the streaming. Okay, for the reason the streaming resume. So where were we?
Well, on Charles V and the Habsburgs and money and politics.
Oh yeah, and those Habsburgs really do love to go marry one of them cousins. They're
yeah.
Keep the
money in the family.
Yeah, the Habsburgs are they really influence Europe in a way where they could just control Sicily, Spain, and at the point, I don't think there's any Habsburgs left. I don't think, like, right now. Are there any Habsburgs left in the world?
I don't know.
I guess I gotta look that up because I doubt that there are any left. But yeah, they were the major family that pretty much controlled the HRE. And
end of old dynasty as Otto von Habsburg is laid to rest.
Yeah, Otto the First was, I think, the one who was officially the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire.
Well, this is cool for debate right here, because there's people who say that Charlemagne was the first, and then others that say that Otto was the first. So this is an area hotly debated by quite a lot of people.
But like for Charlemagne, I understand that he was, after, like, he had this Frankish Empire. The Pope at the time was very impressed from his his vast empire from, I believe it's from Brittany to pretty much the modern Polish border. He was essentially crowned as the Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope, and then after when Otto came along, the title wasn't really meaningful or anything. But after when Otto came along, the Pope, another Pope, I believe, named him as the Holy Roman Emperor, and I think that's what kind of there is some kind of confusion. But back on the Habsburg thing, there is some modern Habsburgs still around.
Is there?
Yeah, they're right now in Austria. So
that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, the Austria is pretty much their playground.
Yeah, they were dotted all over Europe after all. So
so probably odds are that the modern British family, the House of Windsor, are probably somewhere down the line related to the Habsburgs. Okay, well
was it Bloody Mary, as we call her? Wasn't she
Mary, Queen of Scots?
No, Mary the First of England. I'm trying to figure out. It was the sister of Elizabeth the First.
Yeah, Queen of Scots, I think, because that's no. Oh no, she was the one who got executed by Queen Elizabeth, right?
That was her cousin, the Scottish Queen.
Yeah,
there's Henry, two daughters. One was Mary, who we English call Bloody Mary due to the fact that she basically waged a religious persecution in England, and we have Elizabeth I, who everyone knows for the Armada. And I believe Mary was married to one of the Spanish kings. I think it was Charles V. I'll have to check.
Yeah, this is. Let's see. Yeah, this is. Let's see.
Oh no, it was Philip. Philip II of Spain.
Yeah, because I was kind of thinking because there hasn't been a Charles right there for quite a while. Like just named their children at the time Philip, at least the ones.
I see why I got confused. Charles V was his predecessor.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking like, I think at this point, even now, the king right now in Spain is still named Philip, I believe. And so if it's so we all know now that the Habsburgs pretty much have influenced pretty much all over Europe with the exception of Scandinavia, and pretty much. So the HRE. So pretty much, how would we describe the HRE? Like, who would you say besides the Habsburgs were the most influential in the electorate?
I think, to begin with, the most influential would obviously be the Pope, and it had a massive unifying effect on the Holy Roman Empire because essentially these were warrior cultures that relied heavily on religion for cementing, and to be told that they're under the rule of the Holy Roman Empire, it was a massive thing for them. So I think, to begin with, the Pope had a massive influence on like the effect of the election, if that makes sense. Not just in electing someone and putting it into power, but also in the grand scheme of things, especially for the warrior culture that was the Holy Roman Empire to begin with. But again, really, when it comes to families, the Habsburgs are the best known, other than the original line, because obviously there weren't many dynasties in the Holy Roman Empire. It was an elected empire, but the Habsburgs were so rich they could pretty much buy their way to.
And like pretty much, if anyone who stood against them, they were effectively crushed politically and economically. But I would argue though, but the Pope's influence was very great until the age of the Reformation, when the Protestants and the Catholics were actually going against each other. And knowing how the HRE was back then, when everything was border galore, there were some who were Protestant and some who were Catholic, and that's when I think that when the Pope's influence in the HRE kind of really diminished in a way, because of the age of the Reformation.
Well, as I was doing my research, I found out that one of the Holy Roman Empire emperors was actually excommunicated 2 times by the Pope. So
was he Protestant or was he still Catholic?
From what I can gather, he was excommunicated because he stretched the borders a little bit too close to Rome for the Pope's liking.
Well, don't mess with the Papal States. That's
seconds. So that was definitely a time when the Holy Roman Empire was definitely not holy.
Yeah. It wasn't even Roman to begin with. If anything, it should have been the Holy Germanic Empire. But even then, I was like, that's like saying it in apples and orange. It's still missing 2 parts. It's not really holy. It's not really an empire either. It's more of a confederation of multitudes of states.
Yes, and that's essentially what it became known as, the Confederation, didn't it?
Yeah, the Northern Confederation in the mid 1800s. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I'm just thinking here, like, how, like, I think it was the Dutch who essentially was one of the major, at least I think the well-known people who break away from the HRE. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, they're the most known. Yeah, I think it was.
Didn't they break away when the whole kind of semi-civil or semi-religious war broke out between the Protestants and the Catholics in the Holy Roman Empire?
And I think that was during between the Anglo-Spanish War, I believe. That was sometime between. I think that was like before that, before or after the Anglo-Spanish War, when Queen Elizabeth refused to marry, I think it was King Philip, well, one of the Philips at the time.
Yeah, the same Philip that we mentioned earlier that I got confused with, Charles V.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's... Yeah, the HRE is one of the most confusing countries. I'm not even sure I could classify it as a country, but...
It's a very loose form of a country.
Let's just say confederation. It's one of the most confusing confederations of Germanic states that ever to occur, like ever to be around in history. Because you would kind of expect that they would be united even after, like, you know, fall of West Rome, and they would just be like, you know, the Goths and I think it was the Franks.
Franks and Vandals.
Yeah, the Franks and Vandals would kind of like, you know, have these giant Germanic, kind of like giant Frankish kind of kingdoms. Like, well, that was true with the Franks, but with the Goths, well, I mean, for the Vandals, they could just kind of collapse, really. How do you think that happened?
The Visigoths were a very small, well, I say a very small empire. They were a very dominant empire for a very short time after the fall of Rome. And I think essentially it's just eternal struggle for power, and essentially there was, again, like, just constant wars with, like, the Byzantines trying to reclaim the territory, and essentially it's just, from what I can kind of figure out from history, they weren't meant as a state, and when they eventually formed into a state, it was kind of like, oh, we're a state now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was kind of also thinking, like, feudalism kind of played a part of it, like, you know, because when the, going back with the Frankish Empire, when I believe it was, when he died, the Frankish Empire was split into three, and West Francia became France, and then like East, like, I think it was, I forgot what's it called when the Middle France, Middle Frank, what was it called again? But essentially, what I'm trying to say is that it's kind of interesting when feudalism kind of plays a part with the HRE, because when the kingdoms, when like, you know, when each royal family has like a children, and they essentially have to split the kingdom in two, so that way one can rule another half of it, and the other one can rule in half of it. So I think feudalism kind of essentially played part of how the HRE was played, like, you know, was made and everything.
Yes, and again, it's the whole classic thing, like, if I split my empire into bits for my sons, they won't fight each other.
Yeah.
And classically, I don't believe that worked from my...
Yeah, like...
Because at the end of the day, if they've got territory, these kings, especially these Germanic warrior class kings, are going to want more territory, more conquest, and especially because for a very, very short time, the Holy Roman Empire was a Frankish Holy Roman Empire rather than the Germanic one. And it's only with, I believe, Otto that it became the first Germanic Otto Empire and Germanic Roman Empire. So
yeah, that's...
Again, I think that was only once he expanded his German part of the empire into Italy.
Yeah, that's when it was really at its height. It expanded from like northern Italy, like from Lombardy, Milan, and then it goes high as far as, I think, between the modern day borders of Denmark and Germany.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to move on to the ancient propaganda stuff, because I think we pretty much
this is just evidence of how confusing and contrived the Holy Roman Empire is.
Yeah.
Because
from like
literally go on talking about it for 2 hours straight and not even scratch the surface.
Yeah.
It's so mind-bogglingly confusing for what it is.
And this is pretty much a stroke of what it is, pretty much. So
yeah,
let's get on the topic I think we could both agree on: ancient propaganda. So
this topic, I suggested this topic because I was on Reddit and I was there promoting Ancient History Guy stuff, and I was on Reddit and was just scrolling through. I believe it was Ancient Knowledge or something like that, and saw this post going, Julius Caesar never lost a battle and all this, and it's just like, can you compile a list of all the battles where he was outnumbered and he won? And it really hit me how essentially people still believe his propaganda that he put out in Rome as the form of his diaries, and people still think he was this unbeatable general, when in reality he lost a number of battles, most notably the Battle of Trajovia. And it just really struck me about how ancient propaganda is still working today, which I think is quite amazing, really, when you think about it.
You say that in Reddit, there's still a group of people that still believe that Julius Caesar is pretty much the, how can I put it, pretty much the Alexander the Great of Europe. And
yes.
Yeah, because as far as I'm concerned, yeah, from also to my admission, watching your videos on Julius Caesar, yeah, he didn't do particularly great as governor of modern day France.
Not really, no.
No, he was pretty much the warlord, one of many that just spans across the Roman Empire.
He was the strong man in France as such.
Yeah. And the thing about Julius Caesar is that while of course he did rose to power and, you know, eventually got stabbed by multiple politicians and all that kind of stuff, he was really more, if you think about it, really more of the propaganda arm of the empire.
Very much so.
Yeah,
yes.
Wouldn't you agree with that? Yeah. Because if you think about it, you see this great hero who basically fended off against the Germanic tribes from this unknown place, and then you see them coming and attacking and pretty much raging and pillaging and everything else. And then you see Julius Caesar, well, he lost a couple battles. He essentially thwarted them off from France, and that essentially can boost his popularity. So I would agree, but you know who I believe that was effective in propaganda was Alexander the Great, to go back with him, because he portrayed himself as a god, essentially, one of like a descendant of one of the many gods that they believed in, and in the fact that he was considered to be unbeatable until his very death, it really shows something how effective that how can I put it, that kind of like, you know, portrayal of oneself from, and how powerful are words, and how powerful are the way how they portray themselves in. I'm not sure if you want to give your thoughts on Alexander the Great.
I get what you're on about. With Alexander, I do genuinely believe he's the kind of person who did genuinely believe that he was a demigod, and it's again the same thing with Alexander goes with like what with Julius Caesar. Like, people believe he never lost a battle, and point of the matter is that it took him a very long time just to get past the Persian gates. Yes, eventually he did get past them, but for solid 2 to 3 days he was stopped in his tracks by this much smaller Persian force. And again, like, as he reached India, he began to lose more and more battles, because essentially he thought he was this demigod, and he thought he was this unstoppable thing. And gradually, as he continued his campaign in India, which granted didn't last all that very long, and indeed it's generally seen as being not successful, he just gradually found out more and more that his legend that he was believing was not the case. And yeah, I don't know where I was quite going with that,
you know, I also believe that, like, going back to like Napoleon and other like popular figures like Hitler or Mussolini, I believe that they honestly, in a way, they were influenced by these kind of ancient propaganda, like you must be the strong man, and like show you kind of like you're kind of a demigod. In a way, that kind of did influence throughout the echoes of European history, because you see Napoleon with his iconic glorified himself with a horse. I'm not sure if you. I don't recall what the painting is, but if you look at the painting,
I know the one you're on about. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at that painting in a way, it signifies it kind of glorifies what he is. What you see that painting, you see a man who knows what he's doing. You know, he will lead you all the way to the end, and that's what I think essentially kind of echoes everything else. So, yeah, that's what I think that ancient propaganda that how it is did in fact influence everything else, and it goes. And in America, when we see when we declared independence from you guys, we kind of portrayed George Washington and several of our founding fathers as geniuses, and as kind of in a way kind of like godlike because of their ideas and how they founded this nation, and so many other people who we could talk about, like what's his name? He founded Grand Columbia for a while, in a way.
I know what you're about. Yeah, what's his name?
That one person. Yeah.
That one person that did something that we both know what it is, but we can't remember his name. Does anyone know what his name is?
I'm gonna Google it right now.
Yeah.
But I know it's a Spanish name. That's all I remember. I'm not familiar much with South American history with this, but yeah.
Like, I know who you're talking about, I just cannot remember his name whatsoever.
Because I had this in my head, and it's like, let's see. Let's see. Yeah, but going on, who do you think that best which figure do you believe that got the most influence out of, like, you know, from Julius Caesar, from Alexander the Great? Who do you think that was most influenced by them?
I'd say out of all the ones that we've mentioned so far, I'd say Napoleon was definitely hugely influenced by a mixture of Alexander and Caesar. You've got to look at the way that I'm going to call it the French Empire, that Napoleon founded, Napoleonic Empire, how they highly valued essentially imperial eagles, and that's straight out of Rome times, you know, with the legionary eagle and all that. That's straight out from ancient Rome. With
the iconic the French imperial eagle. I quite like the way how he did. I'm not sure if he directly designed it, but I think that it gives a powerful look. That's all what I'm trying to say. It gives like this kind of like this Roman imperialistic, like we're gonna rebuild kind of like our version of Rome in his image, kind of like the way. So yeah, I would have to agree that that Napoleon influences, and then after his great grandson Napoleon III also tried to do the same thing, but he epically failed with, you know, the Franco-Prussian War and all. And yeah.
Yes, it's Franco-Prussian War is a typical case of someone stepping over a line constantly without realizing the line's there, and then waking up a monstrosity that is Prussia.
Yeah, the full might of Prussia and Bismarck. His curly and his nice mustache. You know, when I think of
to die for.
Yeah, when I think of Napoleon III, I keep thinking of that modern mascot. It was this. I'm not sure if you have this restaurant at where you live at, but we have this place, Burger King, where he has like this king who just has this beard and just looks like directly like Napoleon III, and it's like, and when I was thinking, like, you know what? I think this is his legacy now on. He's no longer referred as the man who tried to invade Mexico and establish a vassal over there or try to influence the rest of the world. He's going to be known as a man who influenced a restaurant to be the mascot to sell burgers. And I think that if he was alive today, he'll be greatly disappointed by that.
Yeah. But I'm going to the Burger King reference because this is hysterical. Our local Burger King has been shut down and it's been converted into a gym.
I heard that you guys don't even have KFC anymore because you guys ran out of fried chicken. I'm not sure.
Oh, did we? I can't remember. But yeah, that did tickle me quite a lot. But yeah, it's going back to the topic. It's Napoleon definitely based himself on the ancients because, again, you got to remember at that time there was a whole like not Renaissance, but essentially Renaissance of like ancient Greek culture. You know, women were wearing flowy Greek dresses, and a lot of the architecture was based on like Greek designs and stuff. And to put yourself in the image of one of the greats was like, wow, you've really put yourself in the image of one of the greats there, if that makes sense. It took oomph, and you had to have that oomph to back it up.
Yeah, and I believe it was I think that was the age of, I think it was called the Neo-Gothic? No, it was like it was like Neolithic, no, not Neolithic. It was Neo-something, but yeah. It was a revival, essentially, but in a sense that the Renaissance, it was technically a revival of, of Greek and Roman revitalization, because they kind of want to repaint, look, after the fall of Rome, we basically just are not doing too good. We may have the church, we may have everything else, but we're missing a bit of that, Roman imperialism. So we must just, let's try to relive the days of Rome, how it was meant to be.
Yes.
So
yes, and
that's what I.
There's quite a heavy lot of that going on in the world.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, that's
yeah.
Who else do you think that besides Napoleon and besides Napoleon, who was mostly also influenced by the people by Julius and Alexander? Who do you believe that was also influenced by this?
I'd say Hitler kind of had his own kind of influence as such, and it wasn't really drawing influence from anybody else. He was just kind of doing his thing. Mussolini, I'd say, was more influenced by the thought of the old Roman Empire than by any aspect of the Roman Empire, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, but I understand. I made the point earlier that Hitler was influenced by it, but I kind of think that he's more on the line of Alexander the Great, where he basically just wanted to conquer anything and all, and pretty much destroy their culture and pretty much assimilate them to German, essentially. I think they have a term for this in German. It's like Lebensraum, if I pronounce it correctly.
Living space.
Yeah. And I think that's what essentially what the Romans did in pretty much in the Mediterranean. They wipe out
essentially with the Roman is the whole way the Roman army worked is they needed land to pay the soldiers. So, and as soon as they stopped gaining land, the soldiers weren't getting their pay. So, because after the years of contracted serving time, each Roman legionary or auxiliary was given a plot of land from the empire to essentially make their next living off of. And when Rome stopped offering land, they just didn't have the...
Yeah, so I see what you're trying to say. For every time they expand, they promise soldiers basically all the land. They pretty much just certain land, and you pretty much own that, and then you can continue more by just conquering more different lands throughout Europe and the Middle East. But you know who I also believe that was also greatly influenced, especially by Julius Caesar? Benito Mussolini of Italy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he liked to think himself as being the next big Italian Latin commander, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he wants to be the emperor, essentially. It was the Rome that could never be. He was. I right? I'm not sure if you play Hearts of Iron 4, but
Nope.
no, it's a World War II simulation game where you basically play as one of the many countries in the world at the time, and you basically just do kind of just go have fun. But essentially, the inside joke around that game is that Benito Mussolini is so incompetent that he can't even do anything. He can't lead the Axis to do anything, or else he'll be invaded by France of all people. And yeah. And essentially, that was kind of true in real life with Ethiopia when they tried to attack. Like eventually, Ethiopia was the last bastion of essentially of an independent African nation. And even then, when he tried to essentially invade them, he had trouble, but eventually he got it done. But even then, it's kind of hard to rebuild Rome, where you have these modern countries where he essentially needs Hitler to help him out.
Yes, because essentially every single one of his campaigns during the war was just going terribly, and Rommel or Hitler had to send troops to help him and fix up the mess.
Yeah, I think it was Rommel, at that point at the point of the war, the British in Egypt were basically pushing the Italians out of Libya, and they were basically needed Rommel's help with his panzer divisions to essentially push them back. But after the British eventually pushing them out of their own colony, they're still gonna have trouble, and even when they try to invade Yugoslavia, they still needed Hitler's help. So the entire notion of a modern Roman Empire by Mussolini was not even possible.
Well, again, it was used almost as like a propaganda piece, as such, because it was, I'll make Italy great again by making us an empire again, and
that's essentially the entire goal of Mussolini, just rebuild Rome at his image, and basically just say, look, you can't trust the French, you can't trust anyone else. Let's rebuild Rome how it was as before, as one giant European nation ruled under Augustus Mussolini the First. That's what essentially. That's his attitude for everything. Just invade or be invaded. So, I think that. Like, is there anything you wish to want to cover for propaganda, or do you think that's like
Well, really, you can't talk about ancient propaganda without talking about Ramses.
Oh yeah, Ramses.
I think I made that very clear in my videos that he was a bit on the, I don't know what, lying side or just flat out changing history. So.
Well, we got the alternate history hub to figure that out. So, essentially, I would say that Ramses. He was very influential when it comes with Egyptian history at the very least. And
yes, very.
Yeah, what would you say was his his moment, like the moment where he just realized, you know what, people are gonna worship me?
Well, he was a pharaoh, so he probably thought that already.
Yeah.
And I think what I personally find interesting about Ramses, especially as a source, is that it's a primary source. And because it's a primary source, we have to look at it as a primary source. But there's no other sources directly from that time to really contradict what he's saying. And for all we know, he could be telling one massive great lie about, such as the Battle of Kadesh. For all we know, that could be one massive lie, and that could not actually have happened. But because it's a primary source, we have to go, wait a second, what's that?
Oh, what's wrong?
And...
Oh, go on. Oh. Hello?
And,
oh.
Hello?
Oh, there you go. I thought it'd be like somehow connection was cut or something. Like, but go on.
I did too then.
Yeah,
because Ramses, like, the Ramesseum and all those decorations that are depicting the Battle of Kadesh and all of his achievements against the Sea People, because they're his versions of the tales, do we believe them, or do we take absolutely everything with a pinch of salt, or what? Because there's no other sources from that time to really say what's going on.
Yeah, it's like when it comes with ancient Egyptian history, it's very hard to decide if it's like, if it's just really glorifying, or it's just like if it's just like you said before, is like, do we just take a pinch of salt? And yeah, I really do believe when it comes with Ramses, I think that we really need to like kind of take it to a pinch of salt, because like if we're gonna take it like as if it's a news source of today, we have to make sure, we have to like realize what certain words or phrases do they use to essentially say, is this a credible source? Is this kind of like him just glorifying himself? And it's very hard, especially from that time area. But it's something that historians and archaeologists in the future will eventually have to figure out. And speaking of Egyptians, I heard this. I read an article the other day about, they found this apparently a public bathroom, and this public bathroom in ancient Egypt, and it was apparently there was writing inscription, I think it was, and it said that written inside of it was a joke. Apparently, it was called the oldest joke in the world. I do not recall what was the oldest joke in the world, but I do recall that it took place in the public bathroom, apparently an old public bathroom, and it had a joke about, I think it was one of the pharaohs. It wasn't definitely Ramses, but it was definitely one of the pharaohs who were there. I think it was in the Middle Kingdom. It was the era during the Middle Kingdom, I believe. But yeah, that was something completely off topic. It's going
back to like the kind of source material as such with Egypt, like
Egypt is a wonderful but strange place, and really
very alien.
Yeah, and I think it really didn't caught most of our attention until when the Europeans naturally came in, which I think that would be a good segue to talk about British imperialism. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, indeed. Indeed.
So
British imperialism.
Where do you want to start? You want to start with with colonizing pretty much the Americas, or would you like to talk about the colonization of Africa or India? Where would you like to start off with?
India is an interesting topic, especially towards the fallout of the end of British imperial rule in India. But I mean, you got to think that the Americans obviously were quite a lot of people go like, oh, British imperialism, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And because you got the Boston Tea Party and whatnot, and really it was a struggle against it.
Yeah, from what we were taught here in America is that the British were taxing us because we were essentially paying technically reparations for the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, as some like to call it, and like seeing with context with that I could understand, but how at the time the 13 colonies were essentially, I wouldn't say poor, but they were. I wouldn't say they were poor, but they were in this kind of predicament where they had to essentially pay heavy taxes, and that essentially became one of the main contributions for the American Revolution.
Yeah. From what I've read about the American Revolution, there wasn't a large majority actually supporting it, which is incredible considering the outcome of it.
Yeah.
Like, there was a lot of just neutral.
Yeah, there were a lot of neutrals, and those colonists in the 13 colonies who were effectively neutral, or they were like half of the colonies. I think it was like 50% of the like 50% of them were neutral, and then like in like good like 15 were like for like they were for independence, and the others were like pro British, and eventually those people who were for pro British eventually became one of the earliest one of the few that migrated to Canada and essentially became happy Canadians.
Yes, essentially, it was a whole case of, like, do we side with our homeland or do we side with this new uprising as such?
Yeah, this ragtag
in our
group
new
of
homeland.
Yeah, it's like this ragtag group of rebels who may or may not win the Revolutionary War. And the thing about the British is that even up to World War II, their navy was very powerful.
Indeed.
Yeah, it was one of the most powerful navies in the history of the world, and even then, the odds of actually losing the war with the Americans was actually, when I first read about it, when I think about it more, it's kind of surprising, really. Wouldn't you kind of agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
I would say it's very surprising, the result essentially of it, but at the same time, kind of not when you consider how big the British Empire was. Like, coordinating all of that was having several revolts going on and one massive revolt going on in America. It must have been a logistic nightmare, especially in the time without telegrams, with phones.
Yeah.
And
go on.
And it's I just imagine that it was just such a logistic nightmare for the British that essentially trying to organise any kind of effective resistance would.
Yeah, like some might argue that what about they recently obtained essentially Quebec and parts beyond the Appalachian Mountains in America, but even then they just recently acquired it, and they wouldn't really much have an effective force with all that right there, despite the mass territorial gains right there. And I believe at this time, and even I believe at the same time while the Revolutionary War was happening, I believe there was this British sailor who just recently discovered Australia and New Zealand. If correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So effectively, I could see why. I could see why probably that that they could have won, but also at the same time, I think they would have rather have more of their interest abroad, seeing how they discover several new lands, so to speak, in Australia and New Zealand, which eventually became a new source of places where they could just send new prisoners down to over there and basically just do that. Because also the Americans weren't happy about sending prisoners from England to America, essentially to that part. But yeah, sorry to interrupt you right there.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be happy if all of a sudden these mass convicts would just turn up on your door, would you? You just where are you coming from, as such, and but at the same time, it's a strange kind of thing, because I'm talking to an American and I'm English, and it's kind of like going from the English to talk about the American Revolution, what the British have talked about the American Revolution. The English have talked hardly nothing about it, and most of the time we have to find it out for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, even then, I'm an immigrant from who came from a different country who immigrated to America. So even then, that's half true. Well, I wouldn't say half true, but half basically I'm just half just half American. I just grew up here and do stuff. So this is it's one of those things that I think that will kind of baffle historians sometimes when it comes with the Revolutionary War, but not only in terms of logistics, but in terms of what troops do they have available to send to America? In which places where they choose to kind of temporarily diminish their influence so they could stop and just maintain ground, because I know they still have they had colonies even still now well, they're not colonies anymore, but in the Caribbean, with Jamaica and
Yes.
in St. Kitts, in Nivens, I think it was, and
Yeah, the Commonwealth.
yeah, basically the Commonwealth is basically what is the entity of what was the British Empire after World War II. And
Yes, and
yeah, sorry.
what's interesting is the backhanded deals that the British and the French did during the end of World War One, essentially just to land grab for the sake of land grabbing.
Yeah, and effectively, Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Franklin Delano Roosevelt essentially dismantled the British Empire altogether in return of essentially mass producing ammunition, guns, anything that pretty much we need at the time when we were battling the Nazis at that time. So
Yeah.
it was either being occupied by Germans eventually, or dismantle an empire that took almost 500 years to build.
Even when it was building, it wasn't really building to a plan. It was just like, we have this land now.
Yeah, conquer, assimilate, become British.
Yeah, and but yeah, even with the growth of the British Empire, it just wasn't planned at all. Because you just look at it. Look at the map of the British Empire. There's no cohesion whatsoever. It's just literal land that's coloured in red or blue or red, white and red, and
yeah,
it's like, oh, we'll have that.
Yeah.
Oh no, we'll have that as well.
And then especially for the Scramble for Africa campaign, that essentially it just strengthened the idea that, hey, look, we could build European empires, and Germany eventually got inspired by the First World War.
Yeah.
And that was even today, it still has a large influence especially in Africa and the Middle East. And
yes,
it's like, even then the damage is still there. The borders they eventually divide people up where they're not even supposed to be divided, and where they just they kind of like cluster them together with people who were essentially rivals to each other, and that's how you get bloody conflicts in the aftermath of colonialism in Africa.
Yeah, well, a classic example of that would be Pakistan and India.
Oh yeah.
Like, when it's a very, very classical example of that, because it's just literally carving two countries that out of thin air. And from the research that I've done, it was really just one guy in his basement going like, oh, we should do this. And then it happened.
Yeah, that was a disaster, to say the least, because even then, I do believe at the time, Pakistan still had a claim for Burma, I believe. It wasn't Burma. Yeah, I think it was Burma. But either way, it was the other side of India, and that eventually causes problems right there. But I would say another example is basically, and I'm going to go back to Cody from Alt History Hub here, is the Saxe-Picot Agreement after World War One. I'm not sure if that one.
That's his newest video, isn't it? On
he's making a series. He's basically making two series on how the Middle East wasn't meant to be like that, and it was essentially going to be under a united Arabia, and the Saudis weren't really supposed to be in power right now. There's like this joke that it goes like, we live in the darkest timeline when it comes with the Middle East kind of thing. And it's not hard to disagree with that. I mean,
it's not. It's essentially, pardon me. It's essentially a result of line drawing on a map.
Yeah.
And those lines cross over into countries that shouldn't be crossed out, such as some countries are split into three when they should be one, and others are just straight lines when there shouldn't. Classic example being Syria, that straight line that goes directly up in almost like a triangular fashion.
Yeah. I see it with I have a map right now on right there, and then like you could see in like if not Syria, like if Iraq with the Sunni and Shiites over there, and they don't, from my knowledge to on the Middle East, they don't really get particularly along well, and that kind of eventually led the rise to like all strongmen like Saddam Hussein and more modern dictators, so to speak.
Yeah, but it's just random line drawing on a map that has caused all these problems, and it can all be harkened back to imperialism in Europe, because there's these power-hungry countries, well, not power-hungry, land-hungry countries.
Mm-hmm. Well, they could be power-hungry as well.
Yeah, true. And that are just picking random spots of territory, essentially.
Yeah,
and just claiming it as their own.
Like, aside from like the Middle East and Africa, there are also with China with the Opium Wars that took place in the Boxer Rebellion. They helped essentially led to the collapse of the Qing dynasty.
I find the Opium War to be the most British war ever. You are stopping our supply of tea. We are going to war with you. We want our tea.
That's what I think. Out of all the imperialistic wars that I would find the most interesting, the Opium Wars is like the one where it's like, right, we want drugs, and we're gonna sell it to you. So give us the drugs, and we'll sell it back to you, and that caused potential problems and the collapse of your empire.
Of course, China banned opium as a result of the English constantly pumping opium into the market, and
but even then, that didn't really stop them to to sell them. But if anything, it increased the demand for it. Yeah, and I don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe also even the emperor himself secretly even took opium to even because he was also addicted to opioid. I can't even pronounce things right today, but opioid disease because of how addicting it is with its contents.
The English were pumping so much opium into China that it was just overflowing with it, and hence why it's called the Opium War, because there was just so much of it.
Yeah, and but there are even after imperialism with the British, there were still several countries even today that are still part of this vast Commonwealth that pretty much make up what was the post-British Empire, like Australia, New Zealand. They correct me if I'm wrong, but they are still technically they're still all part of the Commonwealth today, right?
They're still sovereign states.
Yeah, still sovereign states, but they are members of this Commonwealth, which is led it's an international organization led by the former British. What was the colonies of the British? Am I right?
Yeah, but Canada is still, the Queen's still the head of state of Canada, I do believe. Australia and New Zealand, basically anything with a Union Jack on it is part of the Commonwealth, I believe.
Yeah. Well,
it's amazing. I don't entirely know my entire country, but
I do believe that that after the inevitable happened with Queen Elizabeth when she passed away, I think the Commonwealth will actually be dismantled. I think that's according to the protocols I read while I was just researching one of the videos I was planning to do with the British royal family. But yeah, I think that overall that if the British were to unite today with the Commonwealths, like the entire Commonwealths and colonies and everything that includes excluding America, I wouldn't mind actually becoming part of this vast empire, to be quite honest, because their power is very influential throughout the world, that I don't think that not even like the combined forces of France or Germany or even like most of Europe for that matter can take on the British with their vast array of colonies.
Yes. Well, that being said, I it would be an interesting scenario that would happen if all the colonies came together back as the empire.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting to see what would happen, especially in like the Canada region, because it'd just be strange, to be honest, to think of, like, especially in my mind, it would just be strange to think that, oh, we're back as the British Empire. It would just be very, very strange.
Well, nothing will really change other than just a name and possibly a new flag if it's proposed in Parliament. Like, you know,
possibly, yeah.
Yeah, just other than that, well, you have access. You'll probably have access to pretty much a good chunk of the world. Well, assuming if you know, countries like Africa and India would consider joining in, because I doubt that if that was the possibility, I doubt that even some of these countries will even bother kind of unifying again as one, with imperialism and all.
Yeah, I mean, the British did definitely leave their mark on the world, and it's not necessarily always a nice, pretty mark.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Wouldn't you say that, aside from the British, who basically much of the world, who would you say came the closest to challenge them? Like any European country could challenge them.
Ooh, are we talking of the time or just
like
as a whole?
As a whole.
As a whole, okay. Closest countries that came to world domination. The common name that comes up to that is the Mongols.
Well, yeah, I guess. But like the Germans and the Mongols, they are mostly a land dominant kind of. They mostly dominate themselves by army, and not by navy. The like next to Japan in World War II, they were kind of the closest. But even then, Japan had they barely had any. They didn't have enough time to essentially rebuild the ships that they lost to the Americans.
Well, the entire reason why Japan started to invade China and Korea and all that was essentially because they didn't have any resources, and in an absolute genius move on the Japanese part, hence the exaggeration in my voice, they decide to go bomb the people who are restricting their oil supplies rather than trying to.
Yeah, they just awoken. They awoken the sleeping giant, and essentially the full might of America just came in and effectively saved pretty much the world. Well, I want to give too much credit to America, but even then, before the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Americans overall, they didn't want to be in the war. It was like 10% that wanted to be, Franklin Roosevelt included. But if it weren't for the bombings of Pearl Harbor, the Axis, I would say, inevitably would have won. Essentially, it would have led to the capitulation of the UK. Sure, there might be strong holdouts, but even then, the UK would have been finished.
The whole thing. Have you read the book Fatherland?
I'm not familiar about that book. What is it about?
It's an alternative history if the Nazis had won, and it's very interesting, like what happened if the Nazis invaded Britain and like
with Operation Sea Lion and all.
Yeah, they reckon that in the book it's like the royal families over in Canada trying to organise a counter-offensive to get back England, and it's very, very interesting as a book. And
yeah, that actually sounds interesting. There was another scenario when it comes with World War II victory. I think it was an Amazon original. It was called Man in a High Castle, where essentially
that's the classic.
Yeah, the classic one. It's like where essentially they nuked Washington in New York. Well, not New York, but I know for sure they officially nuked Washington, and that led to the capitulation of pretty much the Allies in total. And what's left was pretty much Japan, Germany with its Axis, and pretty much some of Latin America and Canada. I don't know why Canada was always the one who just somehow survived from that. Do you?
Yeah, it's kind of like the overlooked part of the entire Second World War. Canada is.
Yeah.
When you dive into like actual military campaigns and stuff, the Canadians were blinking brilliant.
Yeah.
And
they led the liberation of Holland, I believe.
Yeah, and what people forget about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was actually a couple years before the Normandy landings, there was an attempt by the Canadians to do a landing in France, and it got beaten back to stomach horrendously. But the Canadians were just constantly pummeling. Like, they were the ones who were essentially leading the charge in Italy, and it's amazing how, like, the Canadians are completely overlooked in the Second World War because they simply did so much.
Well,
especially for the English when they were on their own.
Yeah, and like going back to even after Normandy, they were very effective as a military group, in Europe, because while the Americans and the British were eventually going into the Rhineland and walking across through it to the Germany's industries in the Soviet Union, just essentially just going past through Poland, the Canadians were essentially just liberated pretty much most of the Benelux region in Europe, and I believe they were also part of a raid in Norway as well. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong. They also launched several raids in Norway, and I think the capital of Oslo at the time.
Probably. I mean, Norway is the whole Scandinavian part of the war is a whole another topic for itself.
Yeah.
And it's a phony war and whatnot.
Yeah, the Canadians are a vigilant people, and no matter who rules the world, the Canadians will somehow will have their lands and just pretty much enjoy what they do best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it Canada and Denmark are fighting the most polite war in the entire world or something like that? Like, there's disputes over an island between the two of them, and they, like, every year one of them decides to go onto the island, leave a bottle of their finest whiskey or something and plant a flag, then leave the island, and next year the other one comes and does the same.
I'm not familiar about that one, but I am familiar about the British and I believe it was Chile with the Falklands, with the Falkland Islands in South America, and I understand there are still, even still today, there's still border disputes on that with that island right there.
Yeah, that's another weird one. I've just recently watched a video by Oversimplified about the Falklands War, and it's very interesting. Like, the whole reason why the Falklands War happened was essentially it was for propaganda reasons. Going back to propaganda, it was just like, we're a strong Argentinian nation, look, we can go beat the English Empire or something like that.
Yeah.
And of course the whole plan was, like, the Falklands are this tiny little island that's so far away from the UK that England wouldn't really be bothered about it, or Britain wouldn't really be bothered about it. And boy, were they wrong.
Yeah, why does I'm not familiar with the conflict overall with the Falkland Islands, but what was the main reason? What strategic importance do they have over there in the Falkland Islands that made it important for them? Like, or was it just a political reason, or was it just like just they just want to maintain that territory?
I think it was just for a political reason to say that. Are we referring to the Argentinians or the British?
I think it was the British. Yeah, the British.
I think it was another political reason just to prove that we're not a soft nation as such, and we're not going to cast this incursion into our territory, all that. But yeah, the Falklands, as I said, I think the only reason why the Argentinians invaded is, again, there is an age-long territory claim on the Falklands from the British, but then again the Falklands have changed hands so regularly upon their discovery that there's loads of territory claims. Like, to begin with, it was one side of the island was a Spanish colony, and then the English came round and on the other side of the island, and then left for a while to go make more colonies, and then came back and took over the whole island. And yeah, and Argentina being part of I can't remember which side of the Pope line because the New World was split between Spain and Portugal. I can't remember what side the Argentinian line was on, but
it was I believe that the Argentinian line was with the Spanish, and the entire Portuguese colony in South America was basically modern day Brazil.
There we go then, and basically Argentinians claimed the territory of the Falklands because the Spanish were the first on the Falklands, and it's a long political mess essentially with the Falklands. But at the end of the day, the Argentinians tried to get this massive propaganda win, expecting the British not to care about the Falklands because they were so away, and that really didn't work in their favours. And yeah.
Do you believe that how can I put this? Do you believe that are there still any potential British colony potential island in the Caribbean or in Asia or otherwise where they would feel like, hey, we're an independent nation now, we don't need Britain's help, we could do this on our own? Do you think there's any more potential independence movements around what's left of Britain?
The real big potential one right now is obviously Scotland.
Oh yeah,
calling for independence, and
are they doing it again?
Apparently so.
Yeah, they were this close. They were like a % close to actually.
Yeah, it was only by 2 points or something like that.
Yeah, even with Scotland leaving, that then pretty much the UK is finished. It's pretty much a couple islands in the Caribbean, England, and Wales, and I believe Northern Ireland was pretty much what's left of what makes up the British Empire. What's left of it?
Yeah.
Yes. But even then.
Amazing.
Oops, sorry.
What, continue.
Oh, but I would say, like, even then, if Scotland leaves, then UK is done. Then they would just be separated to independent countries. And I understand that the Scottish are pro EU, and oh
yes,
yeah, they're pro EU. So yeah, I think that's one of the major contributing factors. Where, like, after Brexit and everything, that's what kind of really ticked them off.
Yeah, it was definitely a ramping up after Brexit was announced, and
yeah, do you believe?
Yeah, what's interesting about the British kind of the original island is for how long Wales wasn't considered an independent country or independent in any kind of way. It just wasn't considered. It was just considered like part of England.
Yeah, Wales for me is one of the most confusing out of all of them in the British mainland, because Welsh, their origins is like, how can I put this? They're like, I'm not sure they even. What do they have their own independent language? I'm not familiar with the Welsh and how they work. What is Wales essentially?
Wales is essentially a very, very mountainous region of Britain, and because it was so mountainous, it's had its chance over time to become its kind of own identity. And
sorry,
that's okay. What's the fun? I would still say the fun bit about Wales, especially when it comes to history, is trying to pronounce the names.
Oh yeah, they have those ridiculous long names. I think they had like the longest. There was this one town I think in Wales that had like the longest name of all. It was like a 20-letter, like kind of like a 20-letter word, and it's like, come to this town, and it's like 20 letters long, and it's like, welcome to station, and then that's it. Like, I don't remember.
I'm gonna try and say it, which is probably gonna go really, really terrible. Langfellow Shirigori Kondurela Antisiligori Gogok. It's
that's the one.
It's so long. Oh yeah, Lanfair Puli Gumge Goga Uquin Drob Ulanda Skilly Go Go Go. There we go.
I feel like that's somehow like a sentence, and they just say, you know what, this sentence is gonna be just one word now, not just that's it. it's interesting how the origins of the UK house started, like with the mix of like with the Scandinavians when they invaded over there, and then with the Germans and the Anglo-Saxons coming in from the south. It's quite interesting what makes up the genetic makeup of essentially what makes up the modern UK.
I'm currently reading a book called Short History of England, and it's basically going right from the end of Roman Britain occupation, and it's covering like the Cornish, the Saxons, the Angles, the Jutes, all that. And I heard once, I used to watch this TV show as a kid called Robin of Sherwood, and it was about Robin Hood. It was a highly legendarized kind of magic kind of thing, but there was one statement on, I believe it was the third episode, where it states Britain is like a sponge for different conquerors, because there's so many different aspects. You've got the Viking aspect, you've got the Germanic aspect in the form of the Saxons, the Jutes, the Angles, and you have the Celtics, you have the Gaelics, you have the Cornish, there's so many, and it's...
Yeah, and the Danish, they just come in there, and as well, why not? Like, the combination, it was pretty much if I have to put this into perspective, kind of like a metaphor, well, not really a metaphor, but if I have to compare it to the UK with another civilization who were dealing with the same problems, well, similar problems, it would have to be medieval China with the Mongols, with the war they demand tribute and become the vassal, and then just carving their own kingdom out of what essentially was a devastated China.
Yes, I'm gonna admit I'm not 100% an expert on Chinese history or anything like that, but
no, my knowledge, knowledge of China is all the way up to 19th century Qing dynasty. That's pretty much it. So that's as far as I got into China. I'm just trying to study more of Asian cultures, but I'm
trying desperately to get into a Japanese culture, if that makes sense. Not Japanese culture, but Japanese history. And I know I'll be drastically interested in it, like really, really interested in it. It's just getting over that hurdle of like starting.
Yeah, my personal favorite of the Japanese is their industrialization. I forgot what they call it, but it was at this point the shogunate and everything else with their hierarchy of social classes were essentially about to collapse after. Well, just not when they began to industrialize, essentially.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it happened so quickly as well when you think about it. It literally went from a feudalistic society to a modern nation in a matter of years.
It amazed me how deep isolationists they were, and they were isolationists, and they had like this same feudal style society and class. All the way up to the mid 1800s, I believe, and that's when everything changed. When America just said, "You know what? Open up ports, or we won't open it," and help us overthrow the emperor, and then that kind of eventually failed. Well, I think.
Yeah, well, we still is an emperor of Japan.
Yeah.
Which
is
incredible.
Yeah, one of the last few remaining monarchies in the world. I believe it was Japan, Saudi Arabia, and the UK is like one of the few major monarchies still around.
Yeah, you got the Netherlands. They still have their.
Oh yeah, the Netherlands, and I think I think it was either Sweden or Norway. They still have their monarchy, but it's really more like the UK's. It's technically a position that just a figurehead.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking online now, and most of these are Her Majesty the Queen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. How do you feel about the? I forgot. I think it was Prince Henry. is marrying an American actress. I'm not sure. How do you feel about that?
I love British media when it comes to a royal wedding. I'll say that.
Yeah, I honestly hope that she just becomes Duchess of America and we just be incorporated back to the. We're in desperate times. We could use some of that. Although some of my fellow Americans will disagree with that statement.
Quite strongly.
Yeah, they're very strong with independence. And if that's one thing I learned from America is that they're very passionate about independence and individualism.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much concludes everything, right? We got everything settled up.
I reckon we did. Yeah, we scratched the surface of the Holy Roman Empire, which is
complicated
in itself. Yeah.
Yeah, and we talk about pretty much everything from Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, and comparing them to dictators essentially with Hitler, Mussolini, Napoleon.
Yeah.
And then we just recently talked about, British and how they essentially changed the world. Even though there are some people who do not like them. Even though there are some who doesn't want to admit, their influence was, great. I'm talking to France right now. Because France wanted to challenge Britain with that kind of stuff, so... Yeah, I know there's going to be some French viewers who would not like that statement, but come on.
Well, again, going back to the American War of Independence, if France hadn't gotten involved, then the revolution wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind for the British to come over here. I'm like the British to just rule, just basically just rule everything. I wouldn't mind that. I could become a member of Parliament. I'll be the MP, the TimeWhen of America, California. Yeah, it'll be fun. But anyways, you wanna try some Q&As, or do you think it's like right now late over there in the UK that you want to get some rest?
It is currently around about 25. Yeah, around about 25 minutes till midnight over here.
Ooh, that's pretty late. So you want to do a Q&A if there is some, or do you just want to just sign off right here?
We've gone over our hour limit thing that we decided we were going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any Q&As?
I tweeted. Let me see if there's any on Twitter, but I kind of doubt it. But we'll see. Let's see. We shall see. No, I couldn't find any. I even tried to put a hashtag with that, and no, unfortunately not. But hey, this is not bad for the first try for the first episode of Historicast. So I guess we should sign off right here. You want to sign off first?
Sure. I guess this is where we discover that we haven't actually thought of a way of actually signing off.
Well, okay. I'm Jorge from the TimeWhen, and oh, sorry.
This is gonna be fun. After you, kind sir.
Okay, I'm Jorge from the TimeWhen.